Hey, fearless souls, or aspiring fearless souls. I'm LJ Bartle, and you're listening to the Go Forward Fearlessly podcast, the show that is dedicated to supporting you to step out of your comfort zone. Today, we have an artist on a mission. Brenda Benedet retired years ago as a successful tech executive. She sold her business and went on to consulting before her life was rudely interrupted with breast cancer. Her journey to not only survive, but to thrive, led her to create an artist's haven, first for herself, and then to share with others in the middle of Ontario's cottage country, in the Kawarthas. And now she's taking this art even further, becoming an educator in breast cancer awareness through an innovative new exhibit running at the Colborne Street Gallery in Fenelon Falls, Ontario. Welcome, Brenda. I'm so excited for people to hear about your new interactive show. I feel like everyone's going to learn something so important, either for themselves or for someone they love. Tell us how Breast and Show came about.
Well, it's turned out to be the most incredible passion project of my life. And back in February, I happened to be going through a local news article about the Colborne Street Gallery looking for artists to come and pitch their idea of an exhibition for their 2023 season. And being a new artist, there's always that little bit of doubt of, am I really an artist? But I had a body of work doing my felted wool paintings, and I had a true light bulb moment where I felt that I could take the breast cancer experience and breast cancer education and turn it into an exhibit. So I put together a pitch, and on March 16th, I was accepted. And then on March 16th, I went to Colborne Gallery with a very large whole suitcase full of my art, which was wool painting, that they haven't seen a lot of that kind of art before. Put it up, and I started my pitch. And my pitch was all about being bold, and for the Colborne Gallery to do something they've never done before. And that is have an exhibition that was cause-related and educational, all about breast cancer. And I asked them if they would give me the month of October to do that, which is the official Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
And the proceeds are all going to Ross Memorial Hospital's Breast Assessment Center, correct?
Absolutely correct, LJ. The journey of breast cancer is long, but it begins with screening and regular screening, and whether that's self-screening once a month through Feel It on the First program or getting your mammograms. And what I felt was very important is that our regional breast assessment center continue to be funded to be able to support the community through high-tech equipment, some of the newest equipment available, as well as, and they actually have, Ross Memorial has incredibly modern equipment, but to sustain that takes additional funds. So I felt it was really important to pick this as a cause. And in doing so, we've officially partnered with the foundation and the Ross Memorial Hospital. And I come to learn that 960 women a month get screened at Lindsay's Regional Hospital, which is Ross Memorial.
That's just amazing. And you started to talk about, your journey, and I know it's been an amazing one that you are happy to share. So let's just talk a bit about your diagnosis that happened in 2017 and how you responded to it.
Well, 2017 6 years ago this month, well, actually, it was, yeah, this month, I was officially diagnosed with breast cancer. And although for 5 years prior to that, I was having annual recalls every time I had a mammogram, little suspicions here, little suspicions there, follow-up mammogram with ultrasound. I trusted that system implicitly. I really, many women get callbacks, and I just didn't have concerns. I just trusted the process. So when I got the recall appointment this time, again, I just felt, okay, I'll go to this appointment. That led to two tumors that were found and then biopsied. So the diagnosis, by the time I had the mammograms, and the diagnosis was in October. And to say I was shell-shocked would be an understatement, because in my mind, well, it doesn't run in my family. No one in my family has breast cancer. This can't be true. So a lot of denial, a lot of shock, a lot of anxiety. And for the first time ever, I had panic attacks. And that was a real new experience for me. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer and proceeded to go through a year of active treatment, including a lumpectomy with a few nodes were removed from the axillary node chain. And when pathology came back 2 weeks later, there were no clear margins, and the nodes they tested were positive. So that led a few weeks later to a complete modified radical mastectomy and all the lymph nodes being removed. And then you've got that arduous wait, another few weeks to find out the pathology of the big surgery. And when that pathology came back, all the nodes were positive, and every piece of the breast had one of 3 types of breast cancer in it. So it was very advanced. I was shocked, LJ. I didn't know there was more than one type of breast cancer. And hence the show, where I'm going to be doing education and teaching people about uncommon symptoms, the myths of breast cancer, and versus the facts, debunking those myths. So I was pretty shocked. Chemo began in December, and that went through till April, and then 2 months of radiation, complications along the way, which isn't uncommon, but I got through all that. And in September of 2018, I had a prophylactic mastectomy on the left side. I chose not to have reconstruction, and living almost a year with one breast, commonly referred to as uniboob by us flatties or lopsided women, and not wearing a prosthetic and not going flat. Being a uniboob was very hard for me. Being flat is easy. It's the best decision I've made, and I don't have to wear a bra anymore. And that part I love. So that was, of all the things I went through in the treatments, the finale was going flat, and that was, for me, that was so I could live my authentic self. I just couldn't wear a prosthetic. I couldn't undergo more surgery. And millions of women around the world are choosing flat. And the surgery is called flat aesthetic closure, so that it's nice and smooth and pretty, and it doesn't show lumps and bumps through your shirt.
What a journey that has been for you. And I'm just wondering, you sound so confident and fearless about it right now. But was that always the way, or how did you get to that point?
LJ, I've been through a lot in my life. I have never been through a journey like breast cancer. As I said, when I was diagnosed, I had my first series of panic attacks that I've ever had in my life. I had 3 sons who were married, but my grandchildren were starting to come. And the thought of not being there, especially when my prognosis kept getting worse. Okay, a lumpectomy, not clear margins. Oh, radical mastectomy, breast full of cancer. Oh, the lymph nodes full of cancer. The pathology kept getting worse, LJ. And it was very difficult to maintain any positivity. Enter chemo, and you are grounded for a long period of time. And I had some complications as well. So I was very unwell. And there were a series of days and weeks, LJ, where I actually did not have hope and I could not feel positive. But what I've learned now is that when you feel hopeless and when you can't find any positivity, there is something about the human instinct, and it is about survival, and it was subconscious. But all I needed to do, LJ, it's emotional, is look out the window. And all of this was going through in the height of winter. And I would see birds coming onto the deck. And some of the birds that I've never seen before, because I then learned some birds migrate down to Ontario from the far north. So there were birds and there was nature and there was weather. And that was the only constant in my life, was nature. And I felt a connection. And I thought, if those migratory birds know what to do when things get tough, go find a better spot, then I can too. So really my motivation really started with connecting with nature. It was difficult, but innately, we as humans have the ability to look for hope. And I found hope in various ways along the journey.
Hmm. I can feel you looking out, the dead of winter, when many people, even in good health, find it depressing. And, it's interesting because sometimes you do see some little buds coming through the snow, and that it is that cycle. And I love that you found inspiration in that.
Yeah. And the spring provided me a really unique opportunity to hold on to a new mantra. And I love that you mentioned the snow, because that's exactly linked to one of my experiences of hope and a mantra, which was ending up being many mantras, because as I felt worse or better, I had to develop different mantras to get through it. But in the spring, when up here in the Kawarthas, we have snow a little longer than the rest of Ontario, and there would be melted snow, but hardened snow in the garden and little mounds. And I would see pokes of daffodils and the little buds of the hostas, the perennial plants poking through. And I just know they just went through the hardest winter with 3 to 4 feet of snow on top of them. And yet they came back every season with a bigger and broader root base so that they would have more foliage for the summer season. And I looked at those buds and I said to myself, I am a perennial. I am coming back bigger, stronger, and better than I ever was. And I really held on to that mantra right through till the gardens flourished, by June and early July. Without mantras, I don't know how I would have gotten through it, but I did, and everyone can, but of course you need a support system as well, outside of what's in your heart and what's in your instincts. You also need that support system.
And your belief in self as well, right? And
Absolutely.
did your relationship with yourself change throughout this process?
The relationship changed, full stop. When I finished radiation, I was mind, body, and soul, a shell of myself. And something else happened to me, which I could have never predicted. I had a complete loss of identity. Like you said, I come from a world of tech and high tech and building companies and selling companies and taking on the world, raising 3 sons. I always had a sense of self, always. And I had nothing. I had no identity, mind, body, or soul. I didn't know who I was. I had a complete loss of identity. And it was only through first realizing that I had this loss of identity and no one was going to be able to help me directly. But I did reach out to the social worker and the therapist at the regional cancer center, which I believe every cancer patient should do because it was just an enormous help. In a short period of time, the therapist realized that I was a visual learner and had me doing some storyboarding. And I found myself lost in time when I was doing those storyboards and cutting out magazine pictures. And the pictures I chose all had to do with mind, body, and soul. And so it was in that that I knew that I had to work on my mind, I had to work on my body, and I had to work on my soul. Enter art therapy and yoga. And the trilogy of mind, body, and soul recovered very frenetically. It wasn't predictable, but it was increasing, never in balance though. So mind would be better some days and soul would be better some days. And when I moved from art therapy into a medium that I fell in love with, which was called wool painting or felting, I discovered that through creating art, I could suspend fear. Because at the end of all that, there was just this constant fear of recurrence. And that would be very bad in my case. So I started to make art regularly so I could park fear. And when fear was parked, I could work on my body, enter yoga. And so I had these periods of fearlessness through art and yoga, art therapy. And in time, within about 2.5 years, here I am, a professional artist doing commissioned pet portraits and now a show at the Colborne Gallery. This has come completely full circle, LJ. And I have to attribute it to getting to the bottom, but knowing I was at the bottom and then reaching out for help.
And not only did you become this artist, but then you created the whole Studio B so you could share it with others.
Yeah.
Tell
Yeah.
me, like, was that a vision or like, did it just evolve? How did that happen?
I was really getting a lot of business doing commissioned pet portraits, and I began to ship around the world. Using wool as the medium, you end up with a very realistic image, and the customers really loved it, and word of mouth it just spread. I had good connections all over just from my previous business world, so I think that helped it take off. But I needed a space, and we had decided to do some exterior renovations, and my husband happily agreed to build another garage, which we needed. And I said, well, how about a second story on that garage that I could call Studio B? And my husband and my friend said, oh, Studio B, that's really good. Studio Brenda Benedet, Studio Bumblebee. And I said, no, Studio B, a place where women, men, myself can go just to be. We are human beings. We're not human doings. So once the studio was built, I opened the doors to yoga programs and art programs, and I do some teaching, but I bring in qualified art instructors for different mediums. And everybody who comes all have something going on in their life where they need to come and be fearless, take a break from fear, and just be. So that's the feedback I actually get from people who walk into Studio B. They walk in and they look around and they're like, there's a vibe here. I say, good, because that was the intention.
Yeah. And then obviously it was within that studio that then you created or you had the inspiration to create this exhibit.
Yeah.
And tell
Yeah.
me how that evolved.
Well, I'm part of a number of breast cancer support groups. And before the pitch even, I knew myself that I had a myth that I believed and I espoused. And that was breast cancer doesn't run in my family. So how could this be a positive test result? What I discovered is there are many myths, and there are many myths that women espouse, and some men, less than 1% of cases are men, that guide behavior. So if you think about any myth in the world, that people's behaviors were linked to the belief of the myth. So my goal was to debunk some of those, well, all of those common myths, first by interviewing over 1,200 women. What myths did you believe in that delayed your diagnosis? Because we know early detection saves lives. And that's why the breast screening center is so important. And there were a lot, like at least 50% of the women had myths about whether or not they could even get breast cancer or what it looked like from the symptoms. So after doing some research, I discovered there was so many different symptoms of breast cancer. There were so many different types of breast cancer I didn't even know of. So felting is an art form that can be 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional. So I started making 3-dimensional breasts out of felt, and each breast, using multiple media, I would identify a different symptom of breast cancer, a less common besides a lump. And before you know it, I had 11 breasts. And that was part of my motivation in my pitch, was to increase awareness. So look at the breasts, touch the breasts, realize there's many symptoms, come to the talks and learn about it. And let's partner with the foundation at Ross Memorial's Breast Screening Center and raise some money for that incredible department. And mission accomplished. So here we are in October, the show is launched, and intentions have been manifested.
Well, it's very interesting when you say that, you want to help debunk these myths because, I think a lot of women probably share your thinking, around it doesn't run in my family, or, they check for lumps. So the lump is obviously the most common known symptom that people check for. So you maybe just describe a couple of your breasts that you have designed for this, and what are some of the things that you want people to see and feel?
Yeah, thanks for that. First of all, the most common way a woman identifies breast cancer for herself, if a mammogram didn't find it or it wasn't there when they had a mammogram, is a lump. Important to know, though, not all lumps can be felt. So while it's important to check for lumps, just know the mammogram is an important part of the assessment, as well as, and I need to pepper this discussion with a little bit about dense breasts. When I was going through breast cancer, I didn't know I had dense breasts. There wasn't a lot of research, and there wasn't anything that was communicated to patients. But we know now women with dense breasts, mammograms can't always pick up a lump. And so follow-up ultrasounds are necessary. The good news is Cancer Care Ontario breast screening program now includes your breast density in the report that you will be mailed after your mammogram in most provinces. And it's not standard across Canada, but in most. So women, find out what your breast density is, because if you have dense breasts, just know that additional screening is required. So back to the symptoms. and that are rare. One other thing, though, I have to say first is that the number one risk factor for breast cancer, because there's risk factors and there's symptoms, right? The number one risk factor for breast cancer is being a woman. That's number one risk factor. There will be 30,000 women diagnosed with breast cancer in Canada this year, and it strikes all ages. Majority of the cases are women over 50, but my chemo buddy was 32 years old with 2 small children. I have a friend who passed away this year. She was diagnosed at 21. Women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s and beyond get breast cancer, but we only screen with a mammogram for women over 50. And so some provinces are moving to 40. That's good news. We have work to do there. Back to the symptoms. I diverged. The symptoms of breast cancer commonly is a lump, but it could be a rash. It's something dry and scaly that you think, oh, eczema. It could be a rash that's oozing. It could be blood coming out of the nipple or a scaly nipple. It could be all of a sudden your breast went lopsided and there's no lump, but it's like, oh, did I bump it? Is it an injury? Or the opposite might be true. It could be a dent on the breast that suddenly it's looking a bit more concave. It could be a man with a lump also. That's something to be careful about. And also trans women who have been taking estrogen therapy for more than 5 years must be screened for breast cancer. Because one of the types of breast cancer is fueled by estrogen, and that was my case. So as much as I'm done my active treatment, I am going through adjuvant therapy. And that meant bone infusions for 5 years. And I continue with hormone therapy to try to, little pill every day, annihilate any estrogen in your body. And medication has come a long way. So there's adjuvant therapy as well. So again, there's many symptoms. So I have many breasts at the show that people can look and feel, take pictures if you want. And if you ever have any of those symptoms, don't pass go. Just pick up the phone and call the doctor for an appointment and request a mammogram. And if your breasts are dense, you'll want to insist on an ultrasound as well.
What is your hope with this exhibit, Brenda?
The hope for this exhibit, from the time I decided that I want to do a pitch until today, is the same: to save at least one life. I know what that feels like. 2 years after I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was having a conference call with a potential client to come and do a talk on women in business. And near the end of our discussion over the phone, my contact said, well, I know you have breast cancer. There's going to be a lot of women in the audience. So if you want to talk about breast cancer, that's fine. So I told her a little bit about the journey. She said, oh, that would be great to include. And then she said, and she's under 40 years old, it's really funny that we're talking about breast cancer right now, because I've had this lump for a while now. I know it's not cancer because it hurts. Another myth. So I let her talk and I said, we've never met yet, but I'm asking a personal favor. And she said, sure, what? I said, the moment we hang up, could you please phone your family physician and have him put in a requisition for your screening mammogram at a breast screening center. Specifically a breast screening center, not a little corner shop that does ultrasounds, mammos, and x-rays. Go to a breast screening center where they have the newest equipment. They have the radiologists on board, and in many cases can do a biopsy the same day. In any case, that was November. We agreed we'd talk again in January. I emailed her on January 7th, I think. I got a response in 2 minutes, and it said, Brenda, you saved my life. I start chemo tomorrow. So when you go through an experience like that, information saves lives, LJ. This show is about saving lives and raising funds for the Ross Memorial, because we have all these artists who also donated work, and we're going to have a silent auction. So we're going to support the cause, and I just couldn't be happier.
And you're giving some talks too. I mean, obviously you're so knowledgeable
Yeah.
about this. I feel like you spent all your time while
I
recovering, learning.
Curious minds. When we're born, through genetics and environment and whatever, we kind of have some innate skills that are part of us as we grow up and go to school and end up leads us to certain careers. One of my two of my innate skills that I identified even as a teenager who was going through all the angst of normal teenage years, I knew I was naturally curious, and I knew that I was enthusiastic and liked, creating relationships and sharing information. All that kind of thing was always important to me. So that was an innate part of my life. And so that led to me doing all sorts of research. I am not a medical professional. I'm a woman who went through breast cancer and have interviewed many hundreds of women. And so obviously the medical professional, your doctor knows best, but you have to advocate for yourself, and with information you can advocate. So there's 2 talks that I'm doing. And the first one is the myths. There are, LJ, so many myths, as I said, that people espouse that delay early detection, their early detection. And I want to say there's early detection, there's earlier detection, and there's earliest detection. And where websites and information and research, early detection saves lives, I'm of the mind where earliest detection saves lives. And how better than to debunk the myths that delay women from getting checked. And I know so many women, over 1,200 women that I polled, all had some myth that drove behavior that may have slowed down their diagnosis. And so that's very important. And the other thing, the second talk is called ... the language of breast cancer. I consider myself, kind of smart, but I was dumbed down in those first 3 months of chronic, constant appointments and testing and terminology, LJ, that I could not comprehend, let alone recall or remember, with buzzwords and acronyms. I had to have my daughter-in-law attend all my appointments just to take notes. And I'm a project manager by heart. I can run global divisions of a company around the world, but I couldn't ask questions and take notes in my own appointments because my mind couldn't focus. So that presentation is talking about the language of breast cancer. The learning curve, well, I was going to say, is like this. When you're diagnosed with breast cancer, the learning curve is like this over 2 months, 2 to 3 months. If I knew a little more then about the language, etc., and what everything means, when I had to make body altering decisions, surgical decisions, when I had to make decisions about approaches for chemotherapy, when I needed to advocate for myself but couldn't because I was in a whirlwind of acronyms and just trying to comprehend. If I knew a few more things beforehand, I would have been able to advocate for myself much, much better. So I want all women to know more about breast cancer. I want all women to know there's more than one type. At the minimum, there's more than one type, and it's not always a lump, and men can get it too. And the list goes on and on. So for the people that will attend those talks, that is the objective. And with the transferring of learning into action and behaviors, that's what I want to see. You know, I want women who attended these workshops, or not workshops, really talks, to come back to me and say, Brenda, you know what? I have this rash and I got it checked. It was okay, but I didn't know that this could have been something else. And thanks to you, I went and had it checked. And even a lump isn't always breast cancer. So, you know, I'm going to pepper hope through the whole thing, but women have to advocate for their rights.
Yeah. You know, when you talk about the earliest detection and people learning more about it, that's obviously a huge chunk of the population. But for those watching right now, there might be some women out there who are actually living with breast cancer or any other illness that may be giving them a lot of fear and uncertainty. So what message do you have for those people now?
Well, when you're living through an initial breast cancer diagnosis and treatment, not everyone does get chemotherapy, and most people will have some sort of surgical outcome, like a lumpectomy at a minimum, maybe just radiation. And if it hasn't advanced to the lymph nodes, often chemotherapy can be avoided. And but we haven't talked about one other aspect of it, and that is metastatic breast cancer, which is known as stage 4. But stage 4 breast cancer, which is now its own disease with its own name, and it's called metastatic breast cancer. And today there's no cure for metastatic breast cancer. But for those women who are listening to this who have metastatic breast cancer, there is so much going on in terms of research and hope. And there are I know a woman who's been living 12 years with metastatic breast cancer. It's being treated as a chronic condition, and there are many medications. So there's lots of hope on the frontier for advanced disease, which we'll call metastatic breast cancer, and for people going through other diseases or initially getting diagnosed with breast cancer. Learning about yourself and what you need to get through this is very important. And it's one thing for everyone around you to support you, but you have to be able to find the littlest glimmer of light. And there will be days when you can't. There will be days when you can't find that glimmer of light, which in that case for me was hope. But we are human, and we all have the human instinct of survival. So in a fearless way, look for hope and then try to feel the hope. And there's a difference. There's a delta between looking for it and actually feeling it. And so for me to feel hope, it was connecting to nature during my darkest days. For me to feel even more hope was to find an activity that had me suspended in time, where I could create art and not feel fear. So really looking deep and figuring out a way, and it's different for everybody, how you can feel hope. First thing is to look for it, and then transition that to feeling hope, because hope is everything. It really is.
And just finally, I want to come back to one of, I think, maybe one of the most fearless things that possibly you did, and you've embraced it so much, and that is the flatty. I guess you are all called the Flatty Society. And I love that, you know, in an age where there's so much pressure about looks and aesthetic. And tell me a little bit just about how you got to that point, you know, that you
Yeah.
were just like, nah, it's okay.
Well, when I went through early diagnosis and early surgeries for a lumpectomy and then a mastectomy, I lived with one breast for the year through treatment. I never left the house. I was so sick. So I wasn't self-conscious about it, with my direct family visiting it. I bought a prosthetic. I wore it once and I did not feel like myself. I wasn't my authentic self because I knew it wasn't me. But the same thing had to do with a wig. I lost my hair. I was bald for almost a year. And I wore the wig a couple times. And when I was out wearing this wig, one of my core values is authenticity. And I couldn't bear to wear the wig, but I could bear to wear a beautiful cap with the silk scarves that I collected over the years when we and women in business used to wear suits with a beautiful silk scarf tied to our neck in the 80s and 90s, as I date myself. But I had this beautiful collection of French silk scarves, and I would wrap it in a bow. Oh, today I'll do this side. Today I'll do that side. And a lipstick to match. That was power for me. So going flat when I ultimately knew I needed symmetry is also a core value for me. I like being even. I love even. And so I made that decision to have the other breast removed. So I got a referral to a surgeon, a different surgeon, and I didn't know it was going to be hard to lose my other boob. I had to go through a couple psych evaluations with the male surgeon. And, once it's gone, it's gone. It's not our policy to remove a healthy breast and, on and on. In the first meeting, I had brought my husband to the meeting and he was directing all the questions to my husband. And that just was not good for me. So I let him ask a few more questions as I formulated a plan. And then I did it. I leaned into his walnut desk and I said, "Excuse me, doctor, I got something to tell you that's very important." And he's like, "Oh, what's that?" And I said, "When I met my husband 43 years ago, he was an ass man. And he's always been an ass man. He has never been a boob man. So he's okay with it." He turned to me and the rest of the conversation was completely to me, and then he agreed to it. So I had the second mastectomy and I felt the best I had felt in a long time. That was on a Friday, just before Labor Day. And the following Friday, I hosted a dinner party for 10 people. I'm flat, I'm free, and I don't need to take a bra off anymore or put a bra on. So for me, it was a core value of symmetry, of evenness, of authenticity. More and more people, women, are going flat. And since I've had the surgery, there is a new OHIP code for a new procedure, which I had to go back and have plastic surgery to make things even. And the scars were pretty bad, which I had to pay for myself. Now, today, 6 years later, there's a surgery called flat aesthetic closure, which is done by a qualified plastic surgeon, and it's covered with OHIP. So many general surgeons, when women go for their first lumpectomy or mastectomy, don't even offer a flat option. And that's the other thing we want to advocate for, is that all doctors and all surgeons should present all surgery options to women, even when they're first diagnosed. And without the advocacy and without the education, which this will come up in the talks, I didn't know I could ask for flat. Doctor said you need lumpectomy. Okay. So advocacy needs to happen. It can't happen without education.
I love that story.
Me too, because I had when I had my loss of identity, I used to be an assertive person, and you had to be, especially women in business. You had to be assertive. And I had lost all of that when I had lost my identity. And as I grew back, mind, body, and soul, that was probably the first time that I consciously asserted with power, enthusiasm, and there was no way I was going to back down. And if that surgeon wouldn't do it, I would have found one that would. I definitely would have, the hunt would have continued. But make me flat. And a lot of women, oh, are you self-conscious, whatever. You know what? I walk around proud because I am proud of my courage, and I'm proud of the decisions I made, and I'm proud that I'm educating other women. So there's a confidence that I get with that, and can't put a price tag on that.
No. Wow. Well, obviously, Brenda, you're a force to be reckoned with.
I am, and for a while I wasn't, but I'm back to Brenda. I'm back to Brenda, and being with whatever emotions show up, and conquering fear. Fear has a job description, by the way. Fear's job description, when it rears its ugly head, is to stop you in your tracks and make you feel like there is no way you can do that, because fear makes you shake in your boots. And really all you have to do is say, fear, move over, because now I know better and you're not going to stop me. So mentally park the fear and go forward anyways, because nothing but good things happen after that.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, on that note,
I think we're at time.
Oh, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your inspirational story, and especially about this leading edge show, Brenda. It's truly remarkable, and I'm so certain that people are going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for this platform, because, in this world of social media and using devices to get our news and to get our information, podcasts are just an incredible way to spread the word. So I am so grateful that you invited me to your podcast, and this itself will make a difference for many women. So thank you.
Well, thank you for joining me on my first podcast ever. So thank you.
Debut.
Yes.
Well, you kicked the debut in the butt. Good job.
Well, I had a great guest.
Thank you.
So if you want more information about the show, check out the Colborne Street Gallery at ColborneGallery.ca, and you can follow Brenda and Studio B on Instagram at studiob.artandwellness. So thank you so much, Brenda. I appreciate all your time and your beautiful energy always. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment below and/or subscribe to my channel. Go forward fearlessly to be you. See you next time.